Most men never say this out loud. You are somewhere unremarkable, a coffee shop, a social gathering, an ordinary street, and a younger woman looks directly at you, not through you, not beyond you, at you. Something stirs inside you before your rational mind has a chance to weigh in. And then it does weigh in, swiftly and without mercy. You convince yourself it meant nothing, that you imagined it, that whatever you felt was the product of ego rather than anything genuine. You fold it away before it can make a fool of you. You keep moving, but something stays with you. That something that stays is not delusion. It is not vanity dressed up as instinct. It is a signal your nervous system picked up before your self-doubt had the chance to bury it. And that signal was accurate. What follows is not going to offer you the comfortable lie that age is irrelevant. That would be too easy, and it would miss the point entirely. Age is real. It carries weight. But the weight it carries is nothing like what you have been led to believe. The story handed to you, the one insisting that a genuine birth year disqualifies you from genuine desire. That story has no psychological basis. It is cultural static, and it has quietly taken something away from a great many men who deserved to understand the truth. There is one reason, something that runs beneath confidence, beneath achievement, beneath anything surface level or tactical, that draws a younger woman back to a man like you repeatedly. We will arrive there. But before that, you need to understand what she is not saying, largely because she probably lacks the vocabulary for it herself. She only knows the feeling. Start by clearing away the noise so the real signal can be heard. You already know the cultural posture on this subject. You have seen it in the subtle shifts of expression, heard it embedded in questions designed not to illuminate but to diminish. Perhaps you have even absorbed some of that posture yourself. The internal voice that labels this inappropriate, self-deceiving, the behavior of someone who refuses to accept where he is in life. That voice speaks with such authority that most men simply surrender to it as fact. But here is what that voice consistently refuses to examine. Attraction is not a social conclusion. It is a physiological event, and the body does not check a birth certificate before it reacts. When a woman feels drawn to a man, she is not first consulting some internal formula. She is not running a calculation that factors in the gap between your ages and returns a compatibility verdict. What she is actually responding to, at a level that operates well beneath conscious awareness, is a collection of signals. Signals about safety, signals about stability, signals about whether this man is truly present or simply performing presence. Signals about whether being in his company allows her to feel more like herself or requires her to be less. Those signals have almost no relationship to how many years you have been alive. They have everything to do with who those years have shaped you into. The real problem is not your age. It is that you have been trying to interpret her response through a framework that was never constructed to explain it. You have been measuring yourself against a standard built around a completely different kind of attraction, one that rewards speed and novelty and physical competition. Against that yardstick, you will never come out ahead. But she is not holding that yardstick. The things you have been quietly treating as shortcomings, the unhurriedness, the weight of your presence, the absence of urgency, the certainty you carry without needing to announce it, these are not flaws with a positive spin. They are the signal itself. And there are women who receive that signal more powerfully than anything else a man could put forward. Here is the misunderstanding that runs deepest in most men when they try to make sense of what happens when an older man draws a younger woman in. They assume she is tolerating the difference, that somewhere in the equation she is trading something she would rather have for something she finds more useful, that the gap is a problem she is temporarily managing and will eventually be unable to sustain. They picture her attraction as incomplete, as conditional, as carrying a quiet expiration date from the very beginning. That is not what is happening. For many women, particularly those who have moved beyond the phase where novelty alone drives their interest, the qualities that emerge from real lived experience are not secondary features. They are the main event. And the years between them, what those years represent in terms of survival and becoming, are not standing in the way of her attraction. In many cases, they are the precise origin of it. Consider what time quietly constructs in a man who has been paying honest attention to his own life. It builds the ability to occupy a room without needing to dominate it. It builds the capacity to let a moment develop without forcing it somewhere. It builds a kind of emotional density, not heaviness, but gravity. The sense that this man has already come through enough that he is not here to prove anything, that he has a place to stand that does not require your validation to stay solid. Now consider what a woman's nervous system is actually seeking, not what her social circle would endorse, not what reads well in a cultural context, what the part of her that works beneath conscious thought is genuinely looking for. It is looking for that gravity, that stillness. A man who has nothing left to demonstrate. A young man entering a room with an edge of competition, a flicker of anxiety about how he registers, an unpredictability in his energy. He is visible, he is compelling, he carries a certain charge. But there is another kind of man. The one who sits down and laughs quietly at something internal and does not offer an explanation. The one who is not scanning for approval. The one whose presence carries a kind of weight that demands nothing from anyone in the room. She notices that second man. She may not have immediate language for why, but she notices. And something in her begins to loosen. Noticing is just the opening. What keeps her there? What turns that moment of noticing into something she finds herself returning to days later is something more precise. Her attraction is not rooted primarily in aesthetics the way many men assume it must be, or rather, not only there. For many women, particularly past their mid-20s, what lands most powerfully is not what a man looks like, but what it feels like to exist near him. And that felt experience is constructed almost entirely from signals so subtle they operate below the threshold of naming. The pace at which he speaks, unhurried not from dullness, but from the absence of anxiety. Whether he is talking to communicate or to perform. Whether there is space inside his sentences, or whether they crowd forward in the compressed rhythm of someone who fears that silence will cost him something. The quality of how he looks at her, present without pressure, seeing her as someone worth actually seeing rather than a surface to evaluate or an audience to win. And then there is the absence of performance, which is harder to articulate but easier to feel. A man who has adjusted himself for the occasion, who is running a version of himself calibrated to her reaction, creates a kind of low-grade friction in her nervous system. She cannot always locate it, but something in her is quietly auditing the interaction the entire time, checking whether what is being offered is genuine. That work is exhausting. It quietly erodes the ease that any real connection requires. A man who is simply present, not managing his image, not tracking her reactions to calibrate his next move, produces the opposite effect. The friction lifts, the auditing stops. She settles in ways she often does not consciously register. She is inside the conversation and realizes at some point that she has not once looked at her phone. She is not braced for a cutting remark, a competing narrative, the low hum of a man who quietly needs her to keep confirming that he is enough. She has simply been here, and something in her has been slowly exhaling without her permission. There is another quality that older men often carry without understanding its power. It is one of the most precise pieces of information a woman's nervous system processes in the early stages of anything real. It is how he relates to silence. Most men, especially those feeling the pressure of making a strong first impression, work hard to eliminate silence. They treat a pause as a problem, a gap as a failure, an empty moment as something that reflects poorly on them. They pursue the laugh, rush toward the next topic, reach for a story before the previous exchange has finished resonating. She tests silence, not as a deliberate strategy, but inevitably. Sometimes by going quiet mid-conversation or in the aftermath of something that mattered, or simply because she is thinking. And the way he meets that silence tells her something no volume of articulate speech ever could. A man who grows uncomfortable in silence is communicating that his inner world is unsettled. That he needs the conversation to keep moving because the stillness feels threatening. A man who can hold silence, who lets a moment breathe without compulsion, without rushing to fill the space with noise, communicates something entirely different. that he is comfortable here without anything to perform, that the space between words does not unsettle him, that he does not need her constant engagement to feel grounded. She goes quiet. He stays with it. He does not fidget verbally. He does not redirect. He simply holds the space, present without pulling. She leans slightly toward him. The silence became connection rather than absence, and she felt it happen. This cannot be faked in any sustained way. It is not a technique that can be deployed. It is the natural result of a man who has genuinely arrived somewhere inside himself, who has accumulated enough living that the quiet no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like room. This is where it becomes essential to understand something that most men, regardless of age, never fully grasp about what a woman is actually reaching for when she allows herself to get close to someone. Everything covered so far has been leading here. There is something beneath all of those signals. Beneath the stillness, the unhurried presence, the ease with silence, the gravity. Something that explains why those things matter and what they are pointing toward. The younger woman who finds herself drawn to a significantly older man, who allows herself to follow that pull past the social noise and into something real. She is not doing so from inexperience. She is doing so from information. Many of these women have already had the alternative, the relationship that made sense on paper but felt wrong in texture. The partnership that looked correct from every external angle but required constant vigilance from within. The dynamic where love was genuine but emotional stability was not. Where tenderness could shift without warning. Where disagreement had the potential to become destabilizing. Where she spent more energy managing the emotional weather of the connection than simply living inside it. She knows what that costs not in theory but in her body. She has lived the particular exhaustion of loving someone whose emotional structure was still being assembled. She carries no judgment about it, only the quiet and settled knowledge that she does not want to carry that forward. When she encounters a man whose emotional architecture is already complete, who can hold a disagreement without escalating it, who can maintain a position without requiring her surrender, who does not need ongoing emotional maintenance to stay stable, she does not process this first with her mind. She processes it with her nervous system, with relief, with the specific physical relaxation that arrives when something you have been bracing for simply never comes. He pushes back on something she said, and instead of going cold, withdrawing, becoming defensive, or steering toward a victory that would damage the connection, he simply holds his ground calmly, without making it mean more than it needs to mean, without needing her to yield in order for him to feel secure. She says to someone afterward, "He doesn't make me feel like I have to shrink. He's just not threatened by me." That observation is not small. That is her nervous system describing a specific kind of safety. The kind most of the men she has been close to could not quite sustain. Not because they were flawed people, but because they had not yet arrived at the place where that steadiness was available to them. Now, slow down, because the layer we are approaching is the deepest one in this entire conversation. It asks something different from you than the earlier parts did. Not just comprehension, but recognition. Recognition of something you may have been doing without awareness, and something you can simply stop. She is watching for one thing more closely than almost anything else. Not your position or status, though those can shape context. Not your appearance, though presence informs that. Not even the steadiness already discussed, though that creates the conditions for this. What she is watching for is whether you will allow her to be entirely herself, fully, without self-editing, without that disturbing your equilibrium. Most men, without realizing it, generate a subtle pressure around women they are attracted to. Not deliberately, not with any harmful intent, but the pressure is present. The pressure of their own need for approval. The way their energy leans toward her when she is easy and pulls back when she is not. The way something shifts in them when she says something strong or unexpected or contrary. The way their comfort depends, in some invisible but perceptible way, on her being uncomplicated to be around. She feels this even when she has no name for it. And in response, she begins to quietly manage herself. She softens an opinion. She moderates a feeling. She monitors her own fullness so as not to disturb the balance of his ease. And she gets smaller. The older man who has done sufficient internal work, who has reached genuine self-possession, does not generate that pressure. When she says something that has an edge, he does not flinch. When she is contradictory, he does not need to resolve her. When she brings a strong feeling into the space, he does not move away from it or attempt to neutralize it. He receives her. He does not try to adjust her back into something easier to hold. He simply makes room. She offers something half genuine and half testing, an opinion with a point on it, a feeling she cannot entirely explain. She places it out there the way women do when they are gauging whether it is safe to be real. He does not become defensive. He does not go quiet in the way that signals retreat. He does not pivot toward something lighter to dissolve a tension she was never trying to create. He simply receives what she offered, sits with it, and responds from a place that is grounded and unalarmed. She exhales more deeply this time, because she did not have to pull that piece of herself back. This is what she has been searching for. Not a man who impresses her, a man she does not have to be smaller around. And now we reach the place this entire conversation has been moving toward. The thing that has nothing to do with age. The thing that was never about age. At the deepest level of what she is experiencing, beneath every safety signal, beneath the emotional steadiness, beneath the stillness and the room he creates, her nervous system is asking one question continuously. Not in words, not consciously, but asking it nonetheless and letting the answer shape everything. The question is, do I feel more like myself when I am near this man? Not more impressive, not more desired in the surface sense, more herself, more fully present in her own experience, more like the version of herself that is interesting and uncertain and complex and alive, not the curated, moderated, socially acceptable version. This is what attraction at its core is actually measuring. Not age, not achievement, not even chemistry in the conventional understanding. The question her body is answering at all times is whether proximity to this person allows her to expand or requires her to contract. And what you have been building, perhaps without knowing that this was what you were building, is the capacity to be that kind of presence. A presence that allows expansion. That is genuinely rare. At any age, in any man, it is rare. She stops explaining herself around him. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she has stopped calculating whether what she has to say is too much. She laughs in a way she has not laughed in a long time. Not the performance of a laugh, but the unguarded one. Or she goes quiet in a way that feels like rest, not withdrawal. Not because he said anything remarkable, not because he executed any strategy, but because nothing in him was working against her. The age gap at this level is simply not the variable being evaluated. What is being evaluated is the felt experience of being near him, the safety in it, the expansion of it, the particular quality of a presence that neither crowds her nor retreats from her, that holds its ground without holding her down. And that quality, the stillness, the safety, the emotional architecture that does not require her to make herself less, carries no age marker. It is simply rare, and she recognized it in you. The question you may have arrived here with was whether you are too old for any of this to be real. That was the wrong question. Not because age has no bearing on anything, but because it aimed you at the wrong measure entirely. The real question is simpler and goes deeper. Have you become someone whose presence allows another person to feel more fully themselves? If the answer is yes, and for many men who have moved honestly through their years it is, then what you carry is not a liability. It is something genuinely worth being near. And the right woman does not simply endure that. She recognizes it in her body before her mind can find the words for it. You do not need to announce this. You do not need to explain it or validate it or present it for anyone's approval. You only need to be it. And to stop apologizing for the years that made it possible. What you carry is not a diminished version of something that was better earlier. It is the thing that was always being built. The men who understand this, who stop competing on terms that were never theirs to begin with, and simply let the weight of who they have become be present, discover something the noise never prepared them for. That it was never the gap she was measuring. It was always the gravity. If something in this landed differently than you expected, if it gave you a quieter and more grounded way of seeing yourself in this, Share it with someone who needs to hear it.